Hi everyone, it's Brendan here and welcome to Blues Analysis. It was a tough night for the Blues fans. Let's take a bit of a reflection on how some of the fans responded. First of all, there's the response of needing someone to blame. Perhaps you blamed the umpires, or the players, or Vossi, or Eddie Maguire. Perhaps after the game you flicked the TV off, turned off the lights, and cranked up REM's Everybody Hurts. Perhaps you thought maybe it's time to try another sport. Apparently they play European handball at the Olympics. Perhaps I could make a start on that and be ready for 2032 in Brisbane. Perhaps you stood at the open fridge door just staring aimlessly, hoping that some of the kids' leftover Easter eggs pop out. But then you realise that there's a tub of connoisseur down the bottom and gorge the whole thing in comfort eating. Pies 88, Blues 83. Tough night. Talking point number one, Daicos delivers. What can I say that people haven't already said? He had a great fourth quarter, 14 disposals, 4 clearances, 2 goals, assists and 1 goal. BOG, 39 possessions. He's a pretty classy act. What was running through my mind, especially when I saw Ollie Hollands on him at the end, is about the role of the tagger and about whether or not it's a stupid idea to think about double teaming. I mean, I follow a fair bit of basketball and double teaming is a pretty commonplace. Now, admittedly, there's a different number of people on the court. There's a different shape to the ball. There's a different vibe to the game. But this guy was so good. That was the first thing that went to my mind. Now, I have no idea about coaching, of course, but I'm just trying to think outside of the box. And the other thing, too, always think back to that guy who played for Freo, Ryan Crowley, how much everyone hated him playing on them, Gary Ablett and the like. So I'm just wondering, is it time for looking for the Delhi factor? Now, if you don't know who Delhi is, Matthew Dellavedova is a famous Australian basketballer. He's still playing in the NBL, the Australian comp. Played a lot of games at NBA. Not your typical fashionable, lean, slam dunking basketballer, but more of a tough, strong, gritty, minded player. And I just think maybe teams need to be more actively looking for that type of player. I mean, he's my favourite player at the moment in Australian basketball. Just for his grit that he's got and also never say die attitude. So just a thought bubble there for fans to mull over. Talking point number 2 is the ruck, and big 201 centimetre Oscar Steen, he just exploded in the last quarter and jumped up and just put the ball down the throat of Daicos, and they just cleared it out of the centre again and again and again. And look, Pitto, he battles well. I actually am a big fan of his. I've got no criticism for him. But, he's muscled up and everything like that. And I'm just wondering, as much as we have to let go of TDK, it would have probably been a different story with TDK can get off the ground and ruck. So in saying that, I think back to round 5, the gather round, when there was no Timmy English in the Bulldogs lineup, and the Hawks just destroyed them. So the ruck is becoming a really important thing in AFL in 2026. And I'm just thinking about a guy who plays NBL basketball. Well, he was playing for the Perth Wildcats. He's just been released of his contract, I believe. South Sudanese, Australian, Lat Mayan, 206 meters tall. 2.06 meters tall. And I watch a lot of NBL, and a lot of the South Sudanese guys are absolutely fantastic. They can get up off the ground and dunk and all the rest of it. And I'm just thinking, maybe we need to be looking for someone like him. He's 27 years old. He's tough. I remember being at Nissan Arena watching the Bullets when Lat played for Cairns, and he was roughing up Bainsey out on the court and stirring him up. And I'd just love to have a player like that in the Blues who can just get up off the ground and take the ruck on against someone like Big Steen. So I think there's going to be changes to that type of recruiting in the future. Talking point number 3, Taylor Byrne misses post siren kick. You might have seen after the game, Pendles from the Pies went over and consoled young Taylor after he missed that goal. And then if you stayed watching the game after the match and the interview at the end, Pendles talked about the man in the arena, and that's a famous speech given by Theodore Roosevelt in 1910. And you can just Google that to look it up. I won't read it out now, but I find that that's a really interesting article to read, because these footy players, at the end of the day, they do all this work to put themselves in those situations where they can either win or they can lose, and there's risk involved, and there's also triumph and defeat and disappointment and a whole range of emotions, but at least they've got the courage to get out there and have a go. Talking point number 4, the kids are all right. Harry Dean and Jagger Smith, they're going to be great players for the Blues, if they hang around, that is. But, man, they looked young out there. The fourth quarter, when there was vision of them, I thought, man, we're asking a lot of these kids to go out there and have expectations on them and that sort of stuff. And I was thinking with Harry Dean, look, best case scenario is he ends up like Harris Andrews, centre half back and just a lock. Wieders has been absolutely brilliant, and Harry will learn a lot from playing alongside of him. Talking point number 5, Jesse Motlop. Man, we are missing him this year so much with his ACL. 22 years of age. Late last season, he was absolutely brilliant. His speed would be so handy. But he'll be back, and it's going to be great when he comes back. Talking point number 6, Cripper. Is the criticism warranted? Look, I personally don't think it is. I think he is having a go. He's got a lot on his shoulders, and he gives 110%. Sure, he's not the explosive player, but he is so physically strong and tough, and gives it his all, and he's a class act. The other one is Harry Mackay. Is the criticism warranted? I watched Harry Mackay so far this year, particularly the last 2 weeks against the Crows and last night, and man, that guy puts his body in positions to be crunched so often, and I just hold my breath a lot of the time when he's going for it, worrying about him being knocked out or whatever. But he is really working hard, and the adjusting of not having Curnow down there is a big one for the side, just to find who are going to be the linchpins of that forward line and how to make it work. And of course, when you're losing those close ones, it's not good for anybody's confidence. So, hopefully it won't be out for too long, but it wasn't good seeing him get, hit across the chops last night, coming out for that lead in the fourth quarter. Talking point number 8, of course, Blues coach Michael Voss. Look, the thing that always comes back to my mind, and I don't know whether it was Vossi or the footy managers or a little bit of Matthew Kennedy, but every time I see Matthew Kennedy play for the Western Bulldogs, that's one bloke who left the Blues who I thought, man, he's actually got better since he left. He's had more opportunities, and you think he would have been really good in our side, and we let him go. So I always watch what happens when players leave clubs, and they favour other players, and if those players go on to excel, it can be a different situation, because if you're at a club like Brisbane, who've got so many good players, Dev Robertson going to West Coast is a good example, just for opportunities. I think there's Sharpie down at Melbourne, and there's a couple of guys playing for the Crow. Kesey went to the Crows to get a game and end up being a superstar. So that's a different kettle of fish, because I think Matty Kennedy might have been looking for more midfield and them saying you're not going to get it here. So he's turned out to be a real versatile player. And talking point number 9, I just think there's some diamonds in the rough out there. There must be, because the guy who I always see playing for Geelong is Lawson Humphreys. He's 23 years old, and he came from Swan Districts in the Waffle, and he was a 2023 Reserves Premiership player. And Geelong seem to find those Irish players or players from local leagues or whatever. And I'm sure for every Lawson Humphreys, there's probably 10 guys who just don't cut the mustard. But his foot skills, man, we could do with someone on the back flank like that. I'm not knocking the guys who are there at the moment. They're battling and doing their best. But I just think we're just going to have to work harder to find that sort of class talent at maybe one of those Waffles or VFL or South Australian footy leagues. Talking point number 10 is keeping the faith, and it's been a bit of a tough road for Blues fans so far this year, coming so close on so many games, showing signs of real class at times. There were moments in that Crows game where we just looked electric, but not being able to pull it all together for 4 quarters, not being able to defend a lead, these are pretty serious issues that the team's trying to work through at the moment. So it'll be a fascinating watch moving forward, and hopefully we can break the deadlock soon.